We begin with the Attorney General tonight, the Attorney General who said today that he believes he's going to find a legal way in the next couple of days to get around a Supreme Court decision that forbids questions about citizenship on the next census. But on the most important new case announced today by the Justice Department, the Attorney General has recused himself. The Attorney General of the United States did not recuse himself from decisions involving the investigation of the president who made him the Attorney General of the United States. That would seem to be an obvious conflict of interest for Attorney General William Barr, but it takes an awful lot for William Barr to recuse himself from anything. But he did recuse himself from the biggest case the Justice Department announced today, the federal sex trafficking case against Donald Trump's old friend Jeffrey Epstein. Here is the Attorney General's explanation today of why he recused himself in this case.
I'm recused from that matter because one of the law firms that represented Epstein long ago was a firm that I subsequently joined for a period of time.
By William Barr's standards, that's a very weak reason for him to recuse himself. Very, very weak. William Barr has another connection to Jeffrey Epstein that is even closer than the one he mentioned today. William Barr's father, Donald Barr, hired Jeffrey Epstein. He hired Jeffrey Epstein to teach high school students, high school boys and high school girls. Before Jeffrey Epstein became a rich player on Wall Street, William Barr's father hired Epstein to be a math teacher at one of New York City's most exclusive private schools, the Dalton School on the Upper East Side of Manhattan. And there was something very, very strange about Donald Barr hiring Jeffrey Epstein. Jeffrey Epstein was not even a college graduate, and that was and is unthinkable on faculties of elite private schools. But Donald Barr hired Jeffrey Epstein anyway, and a year later, Donald Barr resigned from the Dalton School after the Board of Trustees hired what the New York Times called an outside committee to study the school and to assess its operation under Mr. Barr. And not long after that, Jeffrey Epstein left the Dalton School, gave up teaching high school boys and high school girls, and went to Wall Street. But he wasn't finished with high school girls. Jeffrey Epstein was never accused of a crime while he was a teacher at Dalton. And today, Jeffrey Epstein was charged by federal prosecutors with sex trafficking of girls of high school age, girls who were in high school at the time or should have been in high school at the time. The indictment says, quote, Epstein intentionally sought out minors and knew that many of his victims were, in fact, under the age of 18, including because in some instances, minor victims expressly told him their age. Now, sometimes the indictment of an old friend of Donald Trump's for sex trafficking has nothing to do with Donald Trump, but this is not one of those times. Because the Florida federal prosecutor who made a very forgiving deal with Jeffrey Epstein on similar charges that allowed Epstein to avoid prison is now Donald Trump's Secretary of Labor. Now, we have no idea tonight whether William Barr would have blocked this prosecution of Jeffrey Epstein if he had not decided to recuse himself from the case. We don't know whether William Barr would have saved President Trump from the problem of now having to deal with Labor Secretary Alex Acosta's decision to let Jeffrey Epstein off the hook for the same kind of conduct that the U.S. Attorney in the Southern District of New York just indicted Jeffrey Epstein for. Here's what Donald Trump said about his old friend Jeffrey Epstein in 2002. I've known Jeff for 15 years. Terrific guy. He's a lot of fun to be with. It is even said that he likes beautiful women as much as I do, and many of them are on the younger side. No doubt about it, Jeffrey enjoys his social life. On the younger side. Donald Trump knew about Jeffrey Epstein and what Donald Trump called the younger side. Terrific guy. That's what Jeffrey Epstein was to Donald Trump. Terrific guy. And to this day, Donald Trump has not said a negative word about Jeffrey Epstein. Donald Trump has attacked the leaders of countries that are our strongest allies. Donald Trump has attacked Congressman Justin Amash this weekend for leaving the Republican Party. Donald Trump has attacked Elizabeth Warren, Joe Biden, Chuck Schumer. He's attacked me Donald Trump has attacked hundreds and hundreds and hundreds and thousands of people, but he has never once said a single negative word about Jeffrey Epstein, not one word. Jeffrey Epstein did not see it coming when his private plane took off from Paris.
Epstein was arrested this past Saturday evening at Teterboro Airport aboard his private jet that had just landed from Paris, France. Contemporaneous with the arrest of Epstein at Teterboro Airport, agents executed a search warrant on his mansion in New York City and recovered and seized, and that was a search pursuant to a valid warrant. Agents seized evidence, including nude photographs of what appeared to be underage girls.
Jeffrey Epstein pleaded not guilty today. Leading off our discussion tonight are Berit Berger. She's a former federal prosecutor for the Eastern and Southern Districts of New York and an MSNBC legal analyst. And Tim O'Brien is with us. He's the executive editor of Bloomberg Opinion and an MSNBC contributor. And Berit, your reading of this indictment today.
Yeah, this is a stunning indictment, to say the least. I mean, it would be stunning in its own regard, just because here you have very serious charges being leveled against a powerful person. I think given the posture, though, of how this compares to the case that was prosecuted or walked away from in Florida, it makes these charges even more stunning. Because quite frankly, this is what should have happened in Florida. These are the charges that the Florida U.S. Attorney's Office could have brought and probably should have brought. And I think this leaves a lot of open questions about why the federal prosecutors in the Southern District of Florida walked away from these kinds of charges, why Epstein was allowed to plead to really a minor state charge in that case, and why the victims in that case were intentionally excluded from this whole process. So these are stunning charges for a number of reasons. I think given this posture, they're even more so.
So the U.S. Attorney answered very few questions today, but one of the most interesting was, why is this case being brought by the Public Corruption Unit? And you're a veteran of the Southern District, the office where this is happening. Does that sound as strange to you as it does to us?
So the answer is it's hard to tell. So Jeffrey Berman, the U.S. Attorney for the Southern District.
Who is a Donald Trump appointee, let's record.
Correct. And he came out very firmly and said, you know, please don't read anything into the fact that this is being prosecuted by the Public Corruption Unit. And maybe that's right. I mean, it's hard to know. I prosecuted some sex trafficking cases when I was a member of the terrorism section in the Eastern District, simply because those charges came in. I had some experience, and so the case stuck with me.
But did it mean they originated through the terrorism unit? Or?
No, that's the thing. Okay. So staffing decisions, people can start off in one section and move to another. So look, maybe there is a connection between the Public Corruption Unit and these charges, but it could simply be a matter of, you know, these were assistants who were working on some aspect of the investigation. They started in one section and then moved. So I do think we have to take the U.S. Attorney a little bit at his word that it's hard to read too much into this staffing decision.
Tim O'Brien, what is the Trump problem in this case?
Well, the Trump problem is there's possibly other shoes to drop about his relationship with Jeffrey Epstein. Donald, I spent a lot of time with him in the mid-2000s, and he routinely spoke fawningly of Jeffrey. He admired Epstein's lifestyle. He admired his freedom. And I think there's a sort of synchronicity between these two guys. They're not that much different. At one point, Trump and I he took me to the Miss Teen America pageant headquarters on the East Side. He had just acquired the rights to it, and we went to the headquarters, and he was saying to me he was really glad that he had acquired this business because he could find girlfriends for his son, Eric. And then we got up there, and he was, very jazzed to show me the different women, young women, who were part of the pageant. And I suspect that that's something that's tied him to Jeffrey Epstein. Trump himself has not really kept that under wraps very much, that he likes younger women. He's very bold-faced and bald-faced about it. And they spent a lot of time together. They ate in one another's homes. Jeffrey Epstein was a member at Mar-a-Lago. And I think what a lot of people, probably on both sides of the aisle politically, who were connected to Jeffrey Epstein, are probably worried about is what else investigators are going to find when they examine files in his homes in the Virgin Islands and in Palm Beach and in New York, because there could be sort of a Pandora's box of embarrassing information.
Well, let's go to the other side of the aisle. We have a statement from President Bill Clinton tonight, who has been known to associate with Jeffrey Epstein. I'm going to read it in full. This is a written statement from his office. It says, President Clinton knows nothing about the terrible crimes Jeffrey Epstein pleaded guilty to in Florida some years ago, or those with which he has been recently charged in New York. In 2002 and 2003, President Clinton took a total of 4 trips on Jeffrey Epstein's airplane, 1 to Europe, 1 to Asia, and 2 to Africa, which included stops in connection with the work of the Clinton Foundation. Staff, supporters of the foundation, and his Secret Service detail traveled on every leg of every trip. He had 1 meeting with Epstein in his Harlem office in 2002, and around the same time made 1 brief visit to Epstein's New York apartment with a staff member and his security detail. He's not spoken to Epstein in well over a decade and has never been to Little St. James Island, Epstein's ranch in New Mexico, or his residence in Florida. And that island is a reference to an island that Epstein owns that's right off of St. Thomas in the Caribbean, where a lot of this activity is presumed to have occurred. What possibly could Jeffrey Epstein offer to the prosecutors that might be worth more than prosecuting Jeffrey Epstein?
I mean, from where I sit, it would have to be something pretty extraordinary. As a general matter, federal prosecutors don't like to give cooperation agreement to child sex traffickers for good reason. I mean, it is sort of the worst of the worst, and it would have to be really extraordinary information for them to take that kind of extraordinary step into trying to cooperate him. Now, that doesn't mean that he won't try or there won't be some sort of discussions, but I would be absolutely shocked if they offered somebody charged with, not just a one-off, case, but really this pattern of doing this over years with, as they say in the indictment and in the detention memo, dozens of victims in both Florida and New York. I would be shocked if they ended up offering him some sort of a cooperation agreement.
Tim, very thorough statement by Bill Clinton tonight. Of course, if any piece of that proves to be untrue, that would be a big problem. But he's never been to the private island. Some people have accused him of being. But Donald Trump, I can't imagine Donald Trump issuing a statement with that kind of precision that Bill Clinton issued tonight.
Because he couldn't. Clear and plainly, he couldn't issue a statement like that. I think the reason Bill Clinton's also issuing it is every time an embarrassing moment comes up for Trump, whether it involves the rule of law or foreign diplomacy or episodes like Jeffrey Epstein, you have Trump supporters saying, "What about Hillary Clinton? What about Bill Clinton?" Even though neither one of them are in office anymore, none of them have been on the public scene for quite a long time. It becomes a convenient way to support Trump to say that Trump's critics or the media isn't paying enough attention to the Clintons. Cy Vance's name came up today in the same regard. If you're going to criticize people who overlooked Jeffrey Epstein's, misdeeds, why aren't you paying attention to Cy Vance? All of it is a distraction from the reason that people are paying attention to Donald Trump, which is that he's the president of the United States, and he has a skeleton in his closet that is a mile deep, and it includes people like Jeffrey Epstein. And people are asking the question of Trump because he's wielding real authority and power right now, and Bill Clinton isn't.
So let's take this case down the road, a hypothetical road. Let's assume you got to a point of a conviction with Jeffrey Epstein. At that point, he doesn't have any, in effect, fear of incrimination. So could you then take him, if he was convicted of this, before a grand jury to get under oath testimony from him if he doesn't have Fifth Amendment rights to protect at that point?
You could, although theoretically he may, have some sort of an argument that there was other rights that he still had. But absolutely. I mean, I think the issue really is that after somebody has been convicted by an office and received a significant sentence, they don't really have a lot of incentive to sort of play ball. I mean, look, they may be legally obligated to go in front of a grand jury and tell the truth. But if he is if he's facing decades in prison and he's 66 years old,
a perjury charge wouldn't matter.
It's it's a drop in the bucket.
So, Tim, what would the worries be in Donald Trump's mind tonight?
Well, I think he's going to be worried about what compromising information Jeffrey Epstein has about Trump and their relationship. The other big mystery about Jeffrey Epstein isn't just the video goods he might have on different people. No one really knows his sources of funding. other than
Donald Trump's sources of funding.
Well, Donald Trump or Epstein.
Oh, okay.
So Epstein has been a prominent money manager, but no one ever really knew what his sources of funding were. His original client was Leslie Wexner, the founder of the Victoria's Secret and other clothing companies. He was a multi-billionaire. As far as most people in the business press and in New York know, Wexner was the only single large investor in Epstein's funds, and he clearly had the resources to assemble about $100 million in real estate and support the lifestyle that came along with that without any really clear indications of how he was raising his money. And that's very interesting because it's a similar issue that Donald Trump has, is where do these mystery millions flow into the Trump organization? Where do the mystery millions flow into Jeffrey Epstein's funds? And I think that's another thing that'll be very interesting as this investigation progresses.
Let's listen to the U.S. Attorney today outlining the specifics of the allegations and the crimes against Epstein.
Beginning in at least 2002 and continuing until 2005, Epstein is alleged to have abused dozens of victims by causing them to engage in sex acts with him at his mansion in New York and at his estate in Palm Beach, Florida. The victims, all underage girls at the time of the alleged conduct, were given hundreds of dollars in cash after each encounter, either by Epstein or by one of Epstein's employees. The underage girls were initially recruited to provide Epstein with massages and often did so nude or partially nude. These massages became increasingly sexual in nature and would typically include one or more sex acts as specified in the indictment. As alleged, Epstein also paid certain victims to recruit additional girls to be similarly abused. This allowed Epstein to create an ever-expanding web of new victims.
Berit, the details there include what would be statutory rape in the state of New York and in the state of Florida, but in federal law there are no rape charges, so he's just charged under federal law with sex trafficking. Does this evidence package open up the possibility of statutory rape charges in the state of New York and possibly the state of Florida?
Possibly. I'm not sure what the state of Florida would do, but possibly New York would. I mean, I think really the only incentive for the state prosecutors to get involved is if they needed some way that Epstein could be sort of cordoned off from being pardoned, right? I mean, the charges that he is facing in the Southern District are going to carry significant penalties, and so much more so than a statutory rape conviction theoretically would in the state. So I don't think it's a matter of, he needs to be confronted with these serious charges. He's facing about as serious of a charge as you can get right now. So it's not a matter of that. I think at the end of the day, if they wanted, almost like they did with Paul Manafort, if they wanted some sort of charges that could be pardon proof, perhaps those could be New York State charges, but I think it's too early to see.
Can you imagine a pardon for Epstein?
I think Donald Trump can imagine a pardon for almost anyone. So as much as I don't think I could imagine a pardon for someone like him, I think Donald Trump could.
Tim O'Brien and Berit Berger, thank you very much for starting us off tonight. Really appreciate it.